The United States is willing to talk with North Korea anytime, anywhere. That was America's special envoy on North Korea policy, who is in Seoul this week to meet with his South Korean and Japanese counterparts and discuss Washington's approach to Pyongyang. This came after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appeared to signal willingness to return to the dialogue table during an important party meeting last week. The four-day meeting of the Workers' Party Central Committee addressed the North's policy on America as well as dealing with the regime's domestic troubles this year, including its flailing economy and food shortages. We discussed the latest developments on North Korea and what they indicate about the way negotiations might go with the United States. For this, I'm joined by Park Won-gon, Professor of North Korean Studies at Ewha Women's University, and Hazel Smith, Professor of Korean Studies at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Thank you both so much for joining us. Well, to go straight into the discussion, let's start with you, Professor Park. Now, Kim Jong-un, he indicated that the North would be ready for both dialogue and confrontation with Washington. And he said that the North is also going to get fully prepared for confrontation in order to protect the dignity of the state and its interests for the independent development of the country, as well as to reliably guarantee the peaceful environment and security of its state, directly quoting him there. And while his rhetoric, it does seem rather dovish compared to what it's said in the past, what Kim Jong-un said in the past in particular. Does this tell you that he's willing to talk and negotiate with the US and that he's genuinely optimistic about the Biden administration's North Korea policy review?
Well, we are not sure at this very moment because you just introduced what he said, but it's a very ambiguous and short sentence. So it depends on how we interpret this statement. Some people are trying to put the emphasis on dialogue, and other people are saying that confrontation. So it is, I think the North Korea intentionally released this kind of statement. The main purpose to have this statement is to send ball back to U.S. court. I mean, the Secretary of State of the United States, Blinken, said after announcement of the completion of a review of the North Korean policy, and he said that the ball is in the North Korean court. So I think North Korea need to hit the ball back to the United States, and that's the important thing. And because one of the important statements that Kim Jong-un made is he said that he finished to some kind of detailed analysis of the policy tendency of the United States, and he even prepared for the so-called appropriate strategic and tactical counteraction and the direction of activities. But he does not specify about these activities. So still is very vague and ambiguous to open to this interpretation. And I think that's the main intention that North Korea sent this kind of statement. Because right now in Korea, there are many arguments that U.S. should do more. I mean, some yield and concede to the North Korea.
So that's North Korea rolling the ball back to the United States side. And Professor Park, now Sung Kim and James Sullivan, they both showed. So Sung Kim and Sullivan, they both showed optimism for holding talks after the North Central Committee parting last week. And well, this plenary session actually occurs once or twice a year, but this year there was a third, the most recent one, of course. And the Workers' Party also recently, they established a de facto second in command to Kim Jong-un. Does this indicate to you that something is going on, something is up inside the regime?
Well, I don't know whether the Representative Sung Kim and the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has some kind of optimistic view to the regime talk with North Korea, because yesterday Sung Kim, when he met his counterpart of the South Korea, and he said that and also Jake Sullivan make a very similar statement. It's very interesting. But United States are still waiting to hear back from Pyongyang, the proposal meeting. And it's allegedly known that the United States at least 3 or 4 times to offer to have the working level talk. But actually, I think North Korea has refused to this kind of a meeting. So we are not sure whether this time North Korea, even though the Kim Jong-un mentioned the dialogue, whether they are going to come to the negotiation table or not. And that's a very huge issue. And that's the important thing, that we need to wait for a while.
And Professor Smith, now there's been a great amount of attention on North Korea's economy and this food crisis that we're hearing about that they experienced in recent weeks. In this year's third plenary session, Kim Jong-un admitted that the North is currently experiencing food shortages. And of course, we in the outside world, we can't know the true extent of the problem. But what is your estimate of the situation there? And what do you think it means for regime stability?
Well, it's a very good question. And I think what's interesting is that we need to compare where we are today in 2021 with where we were in the 1990s. And most of your viewers will know that there was a famine in the 1990s in North Korea, where probably about 500,000 people were killed from the best research we have. Now, I worked in North Korea throughout the 1990s and spent two years working with World Food Programme and UNICEF. And we didn't know anything about North Korea, neither did South Korea much. We didn't know the names of the counties. They had the maps we had from South Korea. We didn't know food production. We didn't have detail on agriculture, on nutrition. In 2021, in this year, we have actually masses of information which has been collected over the last 25 years on agriculture and nutrition in particular. So we are not in the same position as we were in the 1990s. And we do know a lot about the food situation today. We know about the demography of the population because we've had 2 censuses. We know how much food they need to stay alive. We know what they're producing. And we know today that there is a shortfall and has been since 2018.
Now, this is also raising a lot of questions about sanctions if talks are going to be facilitated between the North and the United States. So in the past, Professor Smith, you've pointed out how sanctions can end up hurting the people more than having the intended effect of punishing the regime officials. Do you think there is any way to make them more targeted or reduce their impact perhaps on the lives of ordinary people?
Yes, there's absolutely ways, and they're very obvious in many ways. The sanctions regime can be maintained and it can go back to what it was. Before 2016, it was a targeted sanctions regime on the military, on the defense sector, and on the government. In 2016, President Obama broadened sanctions so that they hit the civilian economy as well as the military economy. But in 2017, they were particularly designed to hit the civilian economy because they were mainly on oil imports, to the extent that North Korean oil imports per year, the cap on them is the same as what South Korea consumes in one day. And these are very severe, and they directly affect agriculture. They don't affect and agriculture in North Korea is not like some countries which produce cotton. They are food production, and the North Korean population depends upon local food production. So it's fairly straightforward. The UN could just lift the sanctions on oil and on agricultural inputs like fertilizer and pesticides and agricultural equipment. All these are banned. They've directly caused, it's not too much of a stretch to say that they directly caused the food reductions, the massive food fall in harvest in 2018, because previous to that, from the 2000 to 2018, North Korea was actually feeding its people, and the levels of malnutrition had improved so much that children in North Korea, according to all the UNICEF surveys, were better off than anywhere on average than anywhere in South Asia and Southeast Asia, including India, which is a much richer country. Not, of course, compared to South Korea or Japan, which are advanced countries.
Right, so
but in
a strong contrast even from 2018. And well, Professor Park, in terms of the negotiations that may soon take place between Sung Kim and his counterpart in the North, whoever that may be, it seems that the Kim regime is keen on securing regime security and also somewhat an easing of sanctions. But President Biden has made it clear that he's not going to give Kim Jong-un the recognition that he wants, nor accept the regime as a nuclear power. How then do you think they should find their footing for these talks to become constructive or to really begin on the same foot? What do you think will have to be the starting point of their talks?
Well, I think that's very, good question, but at the same time, very hard to answer because I can see there are huge differences between United States and North Korea in terms of the how to get back to the negotiation table and also how to approach the denuclearization issue. And we all know that the President Biden is pretty much different from what the Donald Trump, the previous president of the United States, has pursued. And Biden mentioned several times he does not want to have a in-person the summit with Kim Jong-un because it can give some kind of international reputation and legitimacy to this North Korean regime. Rather, he said that he preferred to see working level talks. So that's why Biden administration has offered at least more than 4 times to the working level talk, but North Korea simply refused that. And North Korea, since the January of the 8th Party Congress, and they said that the first United States should withdraw all the hostile policy against North Korea. Unless United States has withdrawn this hostile policy, North Korea has no intention to have any meaningful dialogue with the United States. So I don't think North Korea has changed this kind of position, even though the Kim Jong-un very recently mentioned that he wanted to have a dialogue. And so we will wait.
And Professor Park, now this ongoing great power competition between the United States and China, how do you think it will affect negotiations between the US and the North? Do you think Washington and Beijing will collaborate, cooperate together to get a good response from the North, or do you think they're going to compete in this aspect too? Also, do you think Kim Jong-un might try and leverage that rivalry between the US and China to get what he wants?
I think that's a very worrisome sign because in order to have some kind of peaceful process for the Korean Peninsula, I think it is very important to have a close cooperation between United States and China. But we are all seeing that this very growing rivalry and the serious confrontation between these two great powers. And then I'm pretty sure China wanted to make North Korea as their asset, and they will give us already has supported North Korea, and then North Korea has no reason to have any meaningful dialogue with the United States. So I think that's kind of very negative sign in terms of the peaceful process to United States to Korean Peninsula. And you're right, and Kim Jong-un and North Korea they have in this kind of a diplomacy for a very long period of time. Even during the Cold War period, North Korea did not take side either the Soviet Union or China, and then they kind of make maximize their leverage over these two countries. And I can see this kind of signs and this kind of tendency in terms of the relationship with the United States and China at this very moment.
Well, we have a lot to, we'll have to wait and see, I suppose. I'm afraid we're out of time today, so this is where we'll have to wrap up the interview. That was Park Won-gon, Professor of North Korean Studies at Ewha Womans University, and Hazel Smith, Professor of Korean Studies at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Thank you both so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you very much for watching.